Good morning, everybody. My name is Will Pomerantz, and I am the acting director of the Kennan Institute. And we are happy to have you here for today's event, diving into the rapidly evolving situation in Kazakhstan. Before I begin, I want to encourage you to stay up to date on all the latest Kennan Institute's events and publications by visiting our website and subscribing to our two blogs, Focus Ukraine and The Russian File, as well as our podcast. If you have any questions for our speaker today, you can send them by email to kennan@wilsoncenter.org, to our Twitter @Kennan Institute, or right on our Facebook page. Please be sure to include your name and affiliation when asking your question. I'm just going to begin with a very brief introduction to Ambassador George Krol. He served for 36 years in the Foreign Service. During that time, he served as ambassador to Kazakhstan, as well as Belarus and Uzbekistan, and he served many other foreign postings, including in Moscow and as director of the State Department's Office of Russian Affairs. He now teaches as an adjunct professor at the U.S. Naval College and as associate of Harvard's University Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies. Ambassador Krol, it's a pleasure to have you here today. And I just want to kind of begin by asking you about some developments that occurred over the last few days, mainly the decision to form a new government in Kazakhstan, as well as the announcement today that the Russian troops, the CSTO troops, would be leaving within a couple days. So from your perspective, how secure is this government, and how long does the Russians, can we really be assured that the Russian troops intend to leave?
Yes, thank you, Will. Yes, there have been lots of things going on, certainly over the last week and the last several days. I don't think any of this is unexpected. The formation of a new government, that was to be anticipated when one of the first things that President Tokayev did was dismiss the old government, but have an acting prime minister. And as he did get confirmed today in his discussion and speech with the parliament of Kazakhstan. And so we shall see, who will be will there be any new faces, or there will be a rejuggling of older faces of people that have been in positions, and will this mean, what will it mean for the policies of if you will, the new Kazakhstan, as President Tokayev said in his speech to the parliament, that this is a new Kazakhstan, and the old Kazakhstan, he didn't say this precisely, but the idea is, okay, the new Kazakhstan now is in existence, and the old Kazakhstan is out. And what does that mean? As far as the return to their respective countries of the CSTO forces, I think that was to be anticipated. The Kazakhstani government and its spokespeople, as well as President Tokayev, who also spoke yesterday evening to the leadership of the CSTO, basically said that, we appreciate your help, your support, which is in a way both moral, but also and necessary support to be guarding state buildings, to allow the Kazakhstani forces, special forces, anti-terrorist groups to deal with the problem in the south. So, and they were always saying, the Kazakhstani government officials, that they would be leaving once their mission is finished. So it would seem that this is a further, as it were, a confirmation that in the eyes of the Kazakhstani government, at least, the situation is under control, and they don't need this support, as perhaps the operations that have been taking place, are able to continue, and everything is secure, and Kazakhstan doesn't need this presence, which would mean that the airport, there was talk that the airport in Almaty was being guarded by the CSTO. I don't think anyone's seen pictures or the like to show that, where were they, what were they doing, and the like. But nevertheless, yeah. I don't have any feeling that they aren't leaving. But the relationship with the CSTO and certainly with the Russian Federation, which was always close, will remain and continue to be close, if not closer, in coordinating a defense, as the Kazakhstani government and Tokayev has said, a defense of their state against any enemies, foreign and domestic.
So President Tokayev was basically seen up until a week ago as a figurehead who ruled at the discretion of the former president, Mr. Nazarbayev. Do you think that he has solidified a political base in which to govern? Or is, despite his representations that the situation is stable and secure, how secure is President Tokayev actually, how secure is he actually?
Well, again, this is all speculation in a way, but from reading, looking at, and listening to what is being said by Tokayev himself, spokesman of his government, like his new state secretary, Yerlan Karin, and others, as well as Kazakhstani analysts in Kazakhstan and outside of Kazakhstan and the like, is that it seems to be a consensus that this shows certainly a consolidation of power under the leadership of President Tokayev, and that not only is Nursultan Nazarbayev himself kind of now further removed, if not removed entirely, from certainly the levers of power, no longer the head of the National Security Council, and that he's been not exactly turned into a non-person, but you don't hear him, except a press spokesman said that he's around or everything, which is that he is out of the picture. But also many of the people that were put into the positions in government by Nazarbayev himself, who are considered to be his closest sort of bureaucratic sort of advisors, people like Masimov and others, the Prime Minister Mamin, whatever. Does this mean that now that they are all out, will the newer group that are in, who come at the lower level, the deputy level, the like, who are somewhat, many of them like Tokayev, were technocrats and things of this nature, is this a change of, if you will, to a new people with a new government that may therefore be able to redistribute power and wealth that was consolidated and wielded by, as it were, the Nazarbayev structure, both political and economic. And will we see in upcoming days, if not weeks or months, this played out in the economic, the political, and not just the governmental field? That Tokayev now has people in that will be loyal to him, and that he is now truly the president of Kazakhstan without anyone standing over him, such as Nazarbayev, which was also could be used, was probably used by those who were close to Nazarbayev as basically their continuation of control that Tokayev may not have been able to, needed to break himself free of, or at least make them understand that the Grand Vizier is now the Sultan, if you will.
Our speaker is Ambassador George Krol, and if you have any questions for him, you can send them via email to kennan@wilsoncenter.org, to our Twitter @Kennan Institute, or right on our Facebook page. You talked about the reassertion of technocrats, but what about politics? Is there any sort of attempt to engage or find a way to which genuine politics and opposition politics can take place? Or is Tokayev a representative of the old and will simply try to rule from a technocratic and administrative standpoint?
Well, we shall see, of course. But listening to him and listening to his spokesman, and also listening to some Kazakh analysts that there is a certain hope that there will be efforts undertaken to connect the government more with the people. What form that will take, they've already had sent a governmental commission to Western Kazakhstan to listen, as it were, the people. And Tokayev has been talking about the listening government. And now will this be beyond listening and will be acting on the basis of what they're hearing, if they really are hearing what the people are saying. And this is something that Erlan Karan, who is, very much a close advisor now to the president, as he had been also with Nazarbayev as well, but, is intimating, and what seems to be now being spread in the official media. So will that mean that there will be greater scope for individuals that have concerns, questions, to bring them into the yurt, as it were, of the state structures and the parliament and everything, and make it more pluralistic in order to diffuse, the tinderbox that seemed to be building up because of the stagnation of the Nazarbayev, what was seen in some respects as the economic and political stagnation of the Nazarbayev structure, if you will, and its inability to really change how it functions. Now, again, the question will be that that President Tokayev has been a part of that structure, as have everyone else in his government, and will they be able to make cardinal changes that will satisfy many of the people of Kazakhstan, who have all different kinds of they've been unified in some respect in their upset with the way the country has been run and governed that hasn't seemed to benefit them economically, as well as in dealing with their social, the needs that they have as a society. So it remains to be seen, but it could be that that using the power that he may have and the influence that Tokayev has and the people that he has there, that will he be able to really press on a reform agenda that will also take into account, all of the many interests that there are in Kazakhstan, including that of their neighbors to the north and also to the east.
Again, our speaker is Ambassador George Krol. If you have questions, please send them via email to kennan@wilsoncenter.org, to our Twitter @Kennan Institute, or right on our Facebook page. I want to see if you have any other information in terms of the protests that ignited. We've all read about the disappointment and the upset about the rise of energy prices, but was there any sort of opposition? Was there any sort of organized opposition that could be, that a leader could kind of emerge from these protests? Or was this simply a spontaneous event that really doesn't have any other political legs other than obviously the overthrow of Nazarbayev?
Well, I think you have to, what I'm hearing from people in Kazakhstan is that there were the first phase of the demonstrations and the Act One of this play was a spontaneous reaction, certainly in Western Kazakhstan, to the increase in the price of liquefied gas, and that this consolidated, as it had been 10 years ago, and it had been going on over the course of since the events in Zhanaozen of 2011. That is not surprising, but that this coalesced into broader sort of echoes in other cities in Kazakhstan, although we don't have much in the way of knowing exactly what was going on in Aktobe and Kostanay and Chimkent and other places. The focus then moved to Almaty, which has been, in a way, a political capital and financial capital, and a capital where, where you have civil society and things of this nature that are functioning, and that initially the demonstrations there early on were going more broadly than simply the prices of gas, but also the need for change, the need for reform, the need for a government to listen to the people and the like. But then it seemed that on the evening of the 5th of January, eyewitnesses told me through other people that spoke to them, family members and everything, that they witnessed the disappearance of the law enforcement from the streets of Almaty. I don't know what happened elsewhere in the other cities of Kazakhstan, but the law enforcement simply disappeared. And then, very organized groups of basically, who were they? Criminal elements, you name it. No one has really identified, but they had sticks and cars and broke into ATMs and took money out and handed them to people that were in dark limousines, in alleyways. I mean, breaking in and trashing the mayor, the Akimat building and the presidency, and they were broken in, trashed, and then they left. And there wasn't like they took over a building and said, "This is our headquarters and this is the new government with it," or whatever. It was just organized mayhem. And also reports were that the security disappeared at the airport, and a crowd of these able-bodied, largely men, young men or anything, just broke in and trashed it and left. So it made it appear like was this sort of a paid-for, organized by who? Rumors go, is it the Nazarbayev, the brother who's very powerful down there, and the nephew and the like? Was it a mixed mash of everything? But it was clearly, it seemed to be, from the people of Almaty's view, where was the protection? Where was the law enforcement? And what's behind that? And of course, Masimov, as the head of the KNB and the other leadership of the security apparatus were sacked. Was it because of this failure to protect, or not being able to control even their own as it were, troops, if you will, down there, and their own entities? And were they given instructions from elsewhere? It remains to be seen. I mean, there will be, and they're saying, the Kazakhstani authorities, there'll be an investigation. So you have this, this very peculiar set of circumstances occurring, and then they disappear. And then, all of the return of the law enforcement and the security, and the idea that they are going after these destructive people who have sown terror and mayhem in this city. And this is a restoration of control under presumably a new leadership of Kayev, that he's brought order back and the like too. So what really is going, who organized this? They keep saying they, or something inside and outside, but it remains to be seen who is going to take the blame. The only person that has been accused of high treason in this has been Masimov, which I think strikes people as very surprising, because he was viewed as so powerful. But if that's the case, then does he then take the blame for this, what would be seen as an extremely serious lack of awareness and an intelligence failure, as well as a failure to protect the people? But again, we shall see.
Okay, so we're going to go to questions now. And the first question is from Ed Houlihan, who asks, what is the impact on China given the turmoil in Kazakhstan? China considers this region as part of its security and energy needs, along with investments. Is Russia coordinating its activities with Beijing?
Well, I think that the Kazakhstani government and President Tokayev has been in very close contact with the president of China. I think very early on, the reports were that he spoke to the president of China, and whether that was the initiative of the president of Kazakhstan, it may have been so, in order basically to assuage the Chinese that everything will be under control, that we don't want this mob or whatever to turn into an anti-China mob, which is something that has happened somewhat, the feelings of some Kazakhstanis about the Chinese and the like. So I think that the Chinese government certainly would want to see the order and stability, and trust that a government under Tokayev, who actually speaks Mandarin Chinese and has a long experience of having served as a Soviet diplomat there, that that he will be in control, and therefore things will not spin out of control in Kazakhstan that might bring into power a ruling regime that might be more hostile to China and its economic interest there. Similarly, that President Tokayev would have called the Russian president. I mean, these are their two largest neighbors, and they're very close to them, in order to give them a briefing on what is going on before the Russians or the Chinese, if they don't hear anything, they'll come to their own conclusions and maybe do things that the government of Kazakhstan may not wish to see because they want to be in control. So it's perfectly natural, it would seem to me, that the Kazakhstani government has assured their major neighbors. They called the Uzbeks, Mirziyoyev, President Nursultan as well, to assure them. And whether or not they got, I don't know, whether or not the borders of Russia, China, and Uzbekistan were closed at the request of the Kazakhstani authorities. Similarly with Kyrgyzstan as well. I don't know. I haven't seen anything to that effect, but it would not surprise me that the leadership of Kazakhstan, that is Tokayev, would be calling to ensure and to quiet any alarms that the neighbors may have about things spinning out of control in Kazakhstan. So I don't think China is glad to see order and the order under Tokayev continue.
Thank you very much. Again, if you have questions, you can send them by email to kennan@wilsoncenter.org, to our Twitter @Kennan Institute, or right on our Facebook page. A second question is from Kent Brown, and he asks, how might the Russian minority in Kazakhstan be impacted by the events of the CSTO's presence and the events overall?
I would say that, again, this is all speculation. I haven't spoken to any of the ethnic Russians in Kazakhstan to know exactly what they're feeling, or to know what they even know. Where are they getting their news from? Up there, where most of them live in the north of Kazakhstan, they get most of their news and reporting and understanding out of Russian media. And how this has been covered in the Russian media will probably influence their own views. But I would not think that ethnic Russians living in Kazakhstan would fear that they would be threatened in what has been going on, because it hasn't taken on a nature of an anti-Russian or anti-ethnic or an inter-ethnic conflict. It could have. I mean, in the sense that Kazakhstan is becoming more Kazakh, and there is a nationalism that has also more, I would say, assertive aspects to it that would be of concern to the non-ethnic Kazakhs living there. But that has been something that, even under Nazarbayev, has been strictly tried to control, so as not to inflame inter-ethnic sort of a conflict. And I think that the Tokayev government would want to assure, and has assured, its population that it will prevent any such effort to try to divide the people of Kazakhstan into ethnic groups. So, and I don't think that there's been any call, I've seen anything that that ethnic non-Kazakhs are demonstrating, expressing concern or whatever. I think they're assured that the fact that Kazakhstan continues to have its close relationship with Russia, and the fact that the CSTO were brought in as a reassuring factor that this isn't going to run out of control, and could be affect them.
How do you assess the reaction from the United States? Obviously, this is not in our sphere of influence, far from it, but the United States and US energy companies have significant investment in Kazakhstan. So to what extent has the United States been tepid in its response? To what extent it has reacted to the order of Tokayev to shoot to kill? What has been overall the US action, and from your perspective, how measured is it?
Well, I think the United States, I don't know exactly, how I don't see the reporting that comes from our mission in Nursultan or in Almaty. I think they were both the missions, from what I could tell from their websites, were more, we're concentrating on security of Americans and the mission personnel because of, particularly down in Almaty, where the violence was seen. Nursultan has been under a curfew, as been the whole country and the like as well. So I think that Washington is reacting to what they're hearing, and I think that hearing things like shoot to kill and calling, if it were, that at one point Tokayev had said that human rights defenders and activists should be careful because they could be manipulated, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that the fear in Washington, in the State Department, if not at the NSC and elsewhere, was that, is this going to be a crackdown on legitimate civil society, and therefore the call for there to be negotiations and like, which the Kazakhstani government, in fact, Tokayev himself, reacted to rather angrily, as if the United States was calling for negotiating with these violent demonstrators, the terrorists, they call them, that we're not going to do so. We're not going to negotiate with them. We're going to kill them. And again, I don't think the United States was referring to those people that were engaged in violent acts of taking over a building, but it was basically the usual call that the United States had: let there be peaceful dialogue and resolve this without either side using force to resolve issues. I think that's an understandable and almost predictable United States response, and it is something that is it would seem to be appropriate for the situation. As for the American, if you will, or mostly international energy companies' investment, I think that the government of Kazakhstan has been very quick to say, we will provide full protection also for diplomatic establishments, and but also for because this is key for the economy of Kazakhstan. They get most of their wealth from the oil coming out of the Tengiz and Kashagan fields, operated by international consortia, but largely, as we know, Tengiz Oil from Chevron. And I think as long as these companies have never involved themselves into politics of any sort, that's kind of the big red line. You don't involve yourself. And so as long as they, and again, the Russians are members of these consortium as well. All that oil goes through the major CPC pipeline through Russia and the like too. So there was, issues about strikes and slowdowns in Western Kazakhstan that may have been affecting operations of Tengiz Shevora, but I understand that that's, they continue to operate normally and the like as well. So I don't see that there is a threat to those particular interests too. And I think Kazakhstan will try, as I think it's already starting to, get the word out in the world that, look, we have everything under control, business as usual, come and invest. We're secure. We are a place that you can do business in, and, relax. We've gotten over this trouble, and we're going to even make it more attractive for you to work in, because there'll be a greater security and stability in Kazakhstan. I could see this as being for the United States, I think, by tying this to the Russia equation and Ukraine and everything, this complicates matters for the relationship with Kazakhstan, because the Kazakhs want to say that, look, this is our partner, Russia, the CSTO, and we needed this, and basically it's really none of your business to be, saying things like, oh, you should be careful about inviting them in because they have a habit of not leaving. Well, they're going to show that they're leaving, and that is demonstratively, I'm sure. But again, the Russians, at least, have never left, and they are their closest, most strategic and important partner that they have. And they understand that, the Kazakhstani government, and whether it's Nazarbayev or Tokayev or whatever, that is crucial to Kazakhstan to maintain that relationship with Russia. And they don't like to be put in a hard place between Russia and the United States, as somehow they have to choose, because at the end of the day, I think we know where the choice for existential purposes has to be.
If you have questions, please send them by email to Kennan@wilsoncenter.org, to our Twitter @KennanInstitute, or right on our Facebook page. You kind of dealt with this issue before, but the question is from Julia Ivanyuk, and she asks, how is the protest in Kazakhstan similar or different from color revolutions that have preceded and occurred in various parts of the post-Soviet space?
Well, you know, it's interesting that Erlan Karan mentioned this in his interview yesterday on this program Oshakbayev Live, which is very interesting. And again, this is the state secretary of Kazakhstan saying that, you know, what he said, that they, not saying who the they were, recognize that the model of the color revolution cannot succeed in Kazakhstan. So therefore, they move to a hybrid form of the use of terror in order to overthrow and attack the state of Kazakhstan. I guess this gives you a sense of how color revolutions are viewed in the high realms of the Kazakhstan government, that these are not, that this is, they become vehicles of how public protests over political, economic issues or whatever can morph into or be used by more nefarious forces to institute a removal of an existing government on the backs of a popular discontent, but taken over by people with more political views that are more organized than the people that are out there protesting for, you know, for change or for economic and social changes and the like. And, you know, they would say that they've seen this in Georgia, that when Shevardnadze was like driven off the platform of the parliament and Saakashvili came in, or they saw in neighboring Kyrgyzstan where, you know, violent crowds, you know, attacking the presidential building in the so-called island of democracy in Kazakhstan, I mean, in Kyrgyzstan, you know, led to the change of numerous presidents and leaders in Kyrgyzstan. And is this all part of a, you know, of a game plan of those who wish to seize power? And I would view that in Ukraine too. They would see that what started as a demonstration over EU, the decision of Yanukovych's government not to adhere or ratify or sign the agreement with the EU, that this morphed into a, you know, an effort to overthrow Yanukovych. You know, by perhaps other oligarchs, others that, who knows, whatever. But that color revolution is how they view that these things can be used. And so I don't, you know, so they're going to, and I think that the idea is that they're letting the populace know, that is the government of Kazakhstan, that this sort of model is not going to work in Kazakhstan, and to warn anyone that tries to use the popular discontent as a avenue for seizing power, that's not going to happen. And also, you know, by calling in the presence of their neighbors, particularly the Russian Federation, is to make that quite clear to anyone that they will defend this and this will not happen. And I think for Russia too, showing everyone that it is willing to deploy with its allies in order to ensure that that model, as they see it, is not going to ever succeed in a country as close to them as Kazakhstan in its neighborhood. So that's at least how I see it.
So from your perspective, are there any other concessions that Russia will want to get from Kazakhstan in the aftermath of sending CSTO troops and calming the situation? I remember the negotiations over the Eurasian Economic Union and Russia wanting to have greater integration and indeed a common currency. And Nazarbayev was the one who rejected that and was the biggest opponent of kind of a more integrated Eurasian Economic Union. So from your perspective, are there concessions, not today, but down the road, that Russia will expect because it had intervened and stabilized the situation?
Well, first, I would say that your characterization of Nazarbayev being opposed to integration and a single currency is maybe a bit not as I have seen it, because Nazarbayev himself was the initiator and very strongly wanted and argued strongly for an integrated economic union, as well as he also came up and spoke very forcefully about having a currency too. He changed his views, over time, but still, it was something he pushed hard, and actually the Russians weren't that interested in for a while. Then the Russians got interested in it and were pursuing it. And I think, and maybe that Nazarbayev saw that, well, there may be some downsides to this as far as how much the Kazakhstani economy can prosper from it when you're really attached to a much larger economy, and seeing that the effects of that union may not have been as beneficial as he originally thought, or that they could be, equal members when the economies are not so equal. So I don't know if, the Russians will push for, greater sort of tying Kazakhstan more closely to their economy. They are. I mean, they are. And it was interesting. Nazarbayev was recently in St. Petersburg as the honorary chairman of the Eurasian Economic Union, speaking at the convening of the members of the Commonwealth of Independent States, and that was the last time, frankly, he was seen in public. But so I think that Moscow, as long as they know that who is sitting in power in Kazakhstan is very alert to their interests and their red lines, they will keep a close eye, and I think they are closer. And the people and to the leadership and the government. So they with the Tokayev government and the like. But I think they'll be careful not to push it too far, because they know that Tokayev has to manage a national aspirations of the Kazakhstan, of people in Kazakhstan, so as not to incite certainly an anti-Russian feeling or the like. And so I think Russia wants to be supportive of it, but the idea that they would take territory, or that maybe Kazakhstan will, has always been rather supportive of Russian positions as they can, and take neutral positions, where they where it can benefit them and the like, but not to get too involved in certainly the Russia versus the U.S. Dynamic and the like as well. But they certainly have made it clear, that is the Kazakhstani government, that they look at Russia as their key ally and friend and supporter, and that is something that is important to understand how far it goes. I would say also that there are. I always sensed when I was in Kazakhstan, you had, of course, this whole cadre of people, younger people who trained and studied in Europe and the United States, the Bolshevik people and the like, and people within the Kazakhstani government that were, looked to Western models even in their security forces and the like. And perhaps as a result of this, with the new people they're in, there will not be that that close attention to following a Western model, which in some respects might be accused of having brought Kazakhstan to this state of affairs because of this is a result of capitalism of a sort where you have the enrichment of a few and not listening to sort of the bulk of the people. So I think this may call into question, you know, those and also the influence of those that, you know, came out of studying in the, you know, in the, if you will, the European American system and their influence, because has that been actually discredited? And will there be a new sort of Kazakh way that will be a hybrid of systems? It remains to be seen, but it's always been a conundrum, a dilemma with Kazakhstan in its economic program and the like of, you know, bringing in people that have had different experiences, but then can they really affect changes in Kazakhstan itself? We shall see.
Our next question comes from Johannes Alfeld. He asks, is there a chance that any of the leaders in Central Asia recognize that not allowing any kind of public criticism or democratic debate carries the risk that in times of crisis, protests will spiral out of control? So do you see this as having implications beyond Kazakhstan in other countries in Central Asia?
Well, I think one of the major countries, Uzbekistan, next door, you know, I think probably feels that, you know, this is something they're well aware of, and in their own society, with the changeover from Karimov to President Mirziyoyev, and that is that Mirziyoyev is also involved in a reform program, but doing it in a way to be more, if you will, evolutionary. But will it really change the power structures, or is this also something where a lot of money or power rested in the people around Karimov himself? And now Mirziyoyev, somewhat like Tokayev, of course, Karimov died. He wasn't behind the scenes or whatever, but has basically pushed many of the people that were, you know, close to Karimov. Not that many people got close to someone like Karimov himself, who kind of kept a distance from many of people around him. But I think that the feeling that you have to be very careful about how do you control popular expectations so it doesn't spin out of control, where if they're not doing enough, there will be a popular reaction to it that could spin out of control if the numbers got very high. And again, you don't have kind of an organized sort of alternative in frankly any of these countries. But in Uzbekistan, I think it's a sensitive area, but I think they will look at what's happening in Kazakhstan, which was always viewed as somewhat a little more liberal, a little freer and the like, as an example of what they always could feel were happening. And now they would probably say, you know, look to the Kazakhstanis. I don't think they would say this to their faces, but it's like, we understand what you're going through. We could have told you, you have to be very careful about all of this. You know, how do you keep control and keep the country, as it were, progressing where you're satisfying the needs of the people without losing control over the levers of power?
Our next question comes from Anthony Bauer from IFAS, and he asks, can we expect to see any direct elections in Kazakhstan to the parliament or other institutions?
Well, I think that's a good question. And I've been hearing from some Kazakhstanis that this may be in the offing, and that if President Tokayev is interested and wishes to push sort of this new Kazakhstan and the like, is that, okay, the next he has a new government. Now it's a matter of a new parliament and with new faces and new people in it, because there were members of that parliament that were, you know, handpicked by, if you will, the Nazarbayev structure. And will there be people, new people brought in? Will it be opened up so that there will be voices allowed to speak in parliament that would be somewhat critical of, and actually where there'd be debates and not simply accepting the messages and the legislative agenda that's presented by the presidential administration. Will there be a more debate, and will there be a more influence, if you will, in the dialogue on it? Even though at the end of the day the decisions will be made by the presidency, but will there be an effort to make the parliament into kind of a part of the listening box? That people in the parliament can speak on behalf of constituencies, and the government will hear them, and there will be a more active debate. That's possible. We shall see what ideas, and if there will be sort of new leaders in the parliament, and a new way the parliament operates vis-a-vis the government and the people of Kazakhstan. But it's possible that might be part of this new Kazakhstan that President Tokayev is speaking about.
So one of the things that brought people into the streets, as it were, was the question of corruption. And obviously the question of corruption has been firmly linked to the Nazarbayev clan and his various sorts of properties around the world. So to what extent is Nazarbayev secure in terms of the current Kazakh government not going after him or his family? And to what extent is it possible that at some point in the future, to address the issue of corruption, or to appear to address the issue of corruption, it all comes down to Nazarbayev and a potential trial or something like that to show that the new Kazakh government is dealing with corruption?
Well, I think that the government and President Tokayev will say, that they will clean up, Kazakhstan, and that it will become, less corrupt and less, and that there will be, greater rule of law and more involvement of people, and that, a clique of people, and he's already apparently said as much today. In fact, apparently even made mention for the first time, if I understand it correctly, a negative about Nazarbayev himself and his family, which was something that they avoided doing. Now, I doubt that there will be a trial of, the first president of Nazarbayev, or sort of an open, trials and arrests of family members. But I think there are, if they haven't happened, they probably have already happened already, the discussion or the talk, the hard talk with the members of the family, and what they are to do in order to, as we will, save themselves. If they haven't already fled the country, which we've heard that, planes were leaving and the like too, and which, they want to avoid, being caught or caught up in an anti-corruption campaign. But, this is where I think the government will say, look, again, we're going to do this, within the yurt, as you will, and not do it so publicly so as to embarrass so many people. But, we'll clean up, as the way, families or clans do, not in the public eye, but that, certain assets will be taken and put in the hands perhaps of boards, or not perhaps in the hands of another person or another family or another member or whatever. But again, this redistribution of the wealth and the levers of wealth, and the state structures and banks and whatever that are basically in the hands of this, if you will, Nazarbayev structure, as has been described in many cases too. So I think there will be this anti-corruption effort, but I don't think it would lead to sort of the public exposure or public trials or anything, I think, to humiliate the president, who's already probably would be devastated to know that his model of everything that he hoped to achieve in 30 years might be viewed as a failure or leading to this, the most serious destabilizing action in Kazakhstan in it, since it became a state, an independent state.
We have several questions asking about the current state of civil society in Kazakhstan. You mentioned that obviously Kazakhstan has been ruled as a technocratic state, as an autocratic state, but are there any sort of branches of civil society that you see kind of developing under President Tokayev, or do you anticipate that the autocratic structures and technocratic structures will remain?
Well, I suspect that that this new Kazakhstan that President Tokayev is talking about might include greater scope for civil society to be active, but within certain parameters. And there may be a discussion with leaders like where, okay, they're consulted and the like, but there may be greater scope for their activities as long as they're not calling for basically governmental changes, with demonstrations and the like, that basically would be viewed as threatening to the stability, as they view it, of the state. That they have a role to play, but what is that role? And what is what controls can they live with, where they are definitely a part of society, but a quote unquote constructive and not destructive part of society. And I think this is perhaps where the members in the presidential administration might be trying to work on, and perhaps having this dialogue with civil society leaders. And what kind of leaders? Will there be a greater scope to have really trade unions that can represent, the views of workers and like? They had been basically sidelined, if not destroyed, in the old Kazakhstan, if you will. So it remains to be seen. And I think that in the civil society in Kazakhstan, there is a certain trepidation that there could be a twist to be more repressive. But then there are those that may feel, well, this might be an opportunity where they would be given greater scope, but within certain parameters. That remains to be seen. Again, people have an optimistic and a pessimistic view of things, of where it could go, and could it become even more repressive, and that they are viewed as a danger and a destabilizing aspect of society. But again, I think if the authorities are really looking at the basis of instability, and that is public upset about their social economic living standards and their inability to see them addressed by government, that's something they need to address. And that's where civil society can be, as you will, a partner in this in addressing this big gap between the people and the government.
We have one final question from Todd Prince from Radio Free Europe. And he, again, brings up the issue of foreign corruption and money laundering, and asks whether the United States will actually take on a more forceful role or take more actions in terms of combating corruption in Kazakhstan, or put more pressure on the government to deal with this issue.
Well, I think that the United States, I know that the United States has frequently brought this up as a matter of dealing with corruption and rule of law issues in Kazakhstan and elsewhere. That I can see will continue. I mean, there may be the matter where the United States would say, how can we help you deal with this, with the new people that are coming in, and which is something we've always been offering through whether it's investigations or how the United States deals itself with money laundering and corruption. So I think that that will be part of the discussion that the United States will presumably have pretty soon with, if you will, the new authorities in Kazakhstan. And I think that I don't know if there had been the annual sort of bilateral discussion of after all, Kazakhstan is a strategic partner of the United States in the way we talk about our bilateral relationship. And I don't know if our new Assistant Secretary, Don Liu, I don't know if he's been to Kazakhstan most recently to conduct that or whatever, but whenever that happens with, if you will, now after this event, I would imagine that has been a standard part of the American agenda in speaking with the Kazakhstani government. The Kazakhstani government, on the other hand, may say, look, United States, what does the United States have to do itself to deal with money laundering that American institutions may be involved in, which creates another issue of the credibility of the U.S. in dealing with this issue, which is something that we all have to deal with as an international issue.
One last question then. I know I said the last one was the last, but Anna Chernova from the Foreign Policy Center in the United Kingdom asks, is there a role for the OSCE in this crisis?
I don't frankly see one. I know that on paper the OSCE can be involved, want to, but I think that the body of the OSCE has become in so many respects politicized between, if you will, the European and the US, and then the other states further to the east. And Kazakhstan has been kind of criticized in the OSCE in the past on human rights and others, and they don't like that. And I don't think that they view the OSCE as being particularly objective about it. Now they will be a part of the OSCE and the like, but I just don't think that the offering of the OSCE will be taken up with great alacrity in Kazakhstan, although the OSCE does have an office, and they have been, if they work on matters of technical assistance, maybe there is scope for that. But I think it will be very carefully controlled by the government of Kazakhstan. Because the OSCE and missions, the OSCE are often viewed as being, watchdogs that will wag their finger at the governments, and say what they're doing wrong, and humiliating them publicly. And the fact of having these missions sometimes is viewed as it's a blot rather than something that should be viewed as as a sign of a willingness to work constructively and cooperative with all the membership of the OSCE. So I'm not so sanguine that the OSCE will be able to have that much of an impact, but it's possible that they could. This could be an opportunity for them to involve in the, if you will, the creation, the building, the establishment, facilitating of this new Kazakhstan.
Well, on that note, I want to thank Ambassador Krol for an insightful and comprehensive discussion. We've covered a lot of things, but this is a moving target, as it were. And I think that we can hopefully come back to Ambassador Krol in the near future for some of the updates and developments in Kazakhstan. So thank you again, Ambassador Krol. Thank you to our audience for watching, and we look forward to your participation in future Kennan Institute events. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Will, and thank you to all your listeners.